Welcome to The Forum, your modern-day coffee house, where ideas can be birthed, exchanged, and wrestled with. We celebrate questions, conversation, and reason as powerful tools to enlighten hearts and transform minds, shaping a new generation of thinkers, innovators, and pioneers. We're glad you're here, so pull up a chair and let's begin.
Hello. Good evening and welcome to the Forum at Acute. It's lovely to have you all here. And how lovely was today with that sunshine. I bet you've all really enjoyed the sunshine today. It's been wonderful. So really appreciate you all coming this evening. As you've just heard on the little video there, this is a modern day coffee house and think tank where we like to talk about ideas, where we can exchange ideas, we can discuss things, we can think of new ways and perspectives of listening to everyone. And we very much welcome all sorts of thoughts and talks and philosophies, psychology, theology. We try and cover all bases really here at the Forum at Kew. And we tend to meet every other Sunday, and we've started doing these evening events on a Wednesday, well, typically a Wednesday, but today's Tuesday, where we can kind of open up to a new audience really and kind of make it a bit more accessible for everyone to come at different times of the week because we've all got busy lives. So really appreciate you all being here tonight. And so I met Katy a few years ago, who was going to be doing this evening's talk, and I invited her to come along to the forum because I've been absolutely wowed by her teachings and her theories and philosophies around rethinking your relationship with food. And back in the summer, I signed up for her 6-week course called the Nourish method. And I have to say, I'm somebody who I feel like I'm quite in touch with my thoughts and reasons and consciousness, but I really found what I was learning with Katy so enlightening and revolutionary, really, into how I think about eating and food and myself and being healthy. And I just thought I'd never heard any way about food like this. I just thought it was so different. So I really wanted to open it up for her to share more with as many people as we can, really, because I think it's really, really important what she teaches us. And so I really hope you enjoy this evening and everything that Katy's got to offer you. So without further ado, here's Katy.
Good evening, everybody. I am going to pop this in here and hope that I don't mess it up, which, we'll see. Welcome. So Claire, as she said, asked me to speak about, it was a carte blanche, really, to speak about anything that I cover with the work that I do with my clients. And it's a very big area to talk about. So what I've tried to do in this session is narrow it down to the things that I think will be the most helpful for you to reflect on, hopefully give you a couple of things that are going to make you wonder why you've not noticed that before, and also at the end give you a thing that you can practice that might help if it is something that you struggle with. Now then, I don't want to go on about me because you didn't come for that, but I did want to just give you a little bit of a background about where I come from in terms of why I think the way that I do about food, because I guess really I am far from your typical personal trainer who learns a little bit about nutrition and you go to them and they set your macros and your calories and off you go. So I qualified as a mental health nurse in 2004, which I was saying, I have a couple of my boot camp ladies at the back for support, and I was saying to them, surely 2004 was only 10 years ago, because 22 years ago, I know it's hard to believe with me looking so youthful, but 2004, and I entered into inner city acutes in Bradford. Massive culture shock, I have to say. And then I moved to the retreat in York, which sadly is no longer in place, and I became the manager of the personality disorder unit there. The ACORN program at the retreat was a therapeutic community, which is a very specialist way of helping people with their difficulties. And I'm telling you this because the TC way of working runs so strongly through everything that I do with people, because it's about the power of a group, it's about community, it's about seeing yourself in other people and also being a part of their journey. And there is such power in that, and I love it. I come off the group calls with my clients absolutely buzzing, because the power of those discussions can never be underestimated. I stopped nursing in 2014, which again must only be a couple of years ago, but sadly is not. After the birth of my twins, I always planned to go back. However, a 50, 60-hour-a-week job when you've got 2 babies all of a sudden is quite an ask. So I went through a few years of being a mum, and then I had my daughter in 2018 and thought it's probably time that I did something outside of being at home. I, at the time, was going to mum and baby classes in a studio in York, and I'd fallen in love with it. So that seemed like the perfect thing. I'll go into fitness and I'll make something of that. At the time, I was massively struggling with food. I had done, during COVID, or attempted to do, a very well-known influencer in the fitness industry's diet, and it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was broken by it, and I fell out with the diet industry. I fell out with the whole thing, and I became quite anti-diet for a while. But the problem with, as far as I feel, and I hear from other people, that being anti-diet doesn't solve the problem that people have. And that's this sense that they want to feel in control of food, but not by being in control of it through rules. And so I set about using everything that I'd ever learned in mental health to develop a program that did just that. Of course, I didn't press my clicker, so you didn't get to see that on the screen, which is maybe not a bad thing because there's a lot of words up there. Okay, let me just turn my thing. Right. A lot of people think that they have a willpower problem when it comes to food. You hear it a lot. I just can't stick to a diet. I just can't make changes that happen. I can lose weight, but then I put it back on again. And often what they come back to is the fact that there is something inherently wrong with them, that maybe they're just not doing it right, and they begin to blame themselves. So then we fall into the belief that the perfect diet will solve this. You just haven't found the thing that's going to get you the result. Actually, what people have is a relationship problem with food and often with themselves. Food doesn't sit separately to all of your other experiences in life. If you are celebrating your child's birthday, food is involved. If you are very sadly at a funeral, often food is involved. We use food in line with our emotional experiences, and you cannot separate out the two. What I encourage you to do during this talk as I am going through it is to be curious about yourself when listening to this and to use the questions to help with that. So there are a couple of questions that pop up along the way that I will give you a chance to just think about, either just in your head, using the notes on your phone, using pen and paper if you've got it, but just answering them for yourself. So, what is a relationship with food? Yeah, she's got it. This includes the way that you think, you feel, you behave, and the meaning that you attach to it. So the way that we think, if anyone has ever done anything with CBT, with cognitive behavioural therapy, you'll know that it's a backbone of CBT, that our thoughts and behaviours are very closely linked. So the way that you think in any given moment then is part of a cycle where it impacts the way that you feel. And those two can be interchangeable. You can feel a thing and then think a thing, but often when you sit back from it, you discover that the thought could have been there before you even felt the thing. So your feelings being your emotions, and not just, I feel sad, I feel happy, but one of the things that I do with my clients is that I get them to use the emotion wheel, which is a very pretty rainbow-coloured wheel, which means that I like it quite a lot because it's very pretty. And it enables you to look at the central emotions and then all the ones that branch off from that. You can really easily find it online if you wanted to have a look. You just need to Google emotion wheel and it will come up. So we look to find what the real emotion is. You may feel angry, and that be your primary way of feeling, but underneath it all, you may be feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, disappointed, embarrassed. So there are many, many layers to it, and all of these things are incredibly valuable and relevant when we think about our relationship with food. Because if you are incredibly upset about something, for many people, the solution to that is food. And we make jokes about it. It's in Hollywood films, you know, with the heroine sat on the sofa under the blanket eating the family-sized tub of ice cream, because that's what we do when we're sad. Not necessarily specifically the ice cream, but you get the idea. And then the way that you behave, so the things that you do. Now, underneath this is also the meaning that you attach to it, and that's back to those things about how you might explain your experience in that moment. So, first question. When you think about your relationship with food, what words come to mind? And I am going to try really hard to shut up and let you think, but I'm not famed for it, so I'll give you a moment. Now, as you sit here thinking about that, it may be words that are quite relaxed kind of descriptions. It may be that you think about food and it doesn't elicit anything in you. I also want you to know that if you're sat there and you're thinking more uncomfortable words about it, that's okay. One of the most important things when doing any of this work is that you don't judge yourself for any experience that might come up in any given moment. So hold on to those as we go through this. Next, the 3 drivers of disconnection. So if my theory is that a relationship with food and difficulties with food, or a feeling of not always being at peace with food, is driven by issues in that relationship with food and with yourself, then there are elements of that that are going to just be helpful to look at. And again, you may find that there are ones that particularly speak to you. There may be ones that don't so much. But again, hold on to those feelings and those words that you've put on your current relationship with food. So the first driver that we have is that of restriction, and physical and mental restriction. If you are someone who has a history of dieting, of which there are probably quite a few in this room, that's an important story to the current place that you are in. So if you are someone who has frequently dieted, then in the here and now, it is probably something that you still consider. I'm really sorry. I'm on the tail end of a silly cold. If you think about when you were growing up and what you were surrounded by with food, it may well be that you grew up in a household where food was just food and there wasn't really anything. You ate together and meals were fairly balanced and it was home cooked and all those things. My experience of growing up with food was with a mum who was constantly dieting to make herself fit a narrative that her mum had given her. So my grandma actually told my mum, you will never amount to anything because you are not beautiful enough, because that was the standard that my family held. And although that was never said to me in quite such an explicit way, it was still said. And when you are a child watching your mother try to change her size to be the best version of herself, it gets into you as a child, and you start to think, well, if my mum, who is my mum, and she's my, she's everything when you're 6, 7, then you start to subconsciously think, is there something wrong with me? Am I okay as I am, or do I have to change to fit the narrative that I'm given by my family? Then as you move into your teenage years, I don't know if anyone else has been watching the Netflix documentary about America's Next Top Model. Has anyone watched it? So we grew up, some of us in this room, grew up very much in our most influential period of our lives. And watching that back, it's shocking. It was literally about the only way that you can be validated as a human is if you are skinny and beautiful, and there is no other value. And that was in all of the media in the 90s, the 2000s, and it still exists in our media today. There are still the front covers that will make comment on famous people's bodies and, oh, she's gained a stone. And you are not immune to the subconscious effects of this. All or nothing thinking. So either the idea that you have to be perfect, or what are you? Where does that leave you? Because if you're not perfect, then is the only alternative to that you are, I don't even know what, failing in some way. And again, these are messages that can sit really strongly within yourself, your experience, and still be fed to you in your day-to-day life. And then, if you are someone who tries to solve some of those problems by physical restriction in your diet, one of the other drivers of the disconnection with the healthy relationship with food is this idea about, I'll be good tomorrow. It's just that today I've got it wrong, but tomorrow I'll get it right. And not being somewhere in the middle where it's just a much more relaxed way to be. Now I've run out of things, so I'm going to have to look at it from the back. Okay, so secondly, we have emotional coping. I could talk about emotional coping for days, literally days. It is just, it's my thing, because the way that humans adapt the way that they behave to fit their emotional narrative is absolutely fascinating, and we all do it. Not just in relation to food, but in relation to every single thing in your life. When it comes to food, there are 3 main things that push the choices that you make about food if it is something that you have learnt to use as a way of coping with the way that you feel. So if you take yourself back to the person sat on the sofa with the family-sized tub of ice cream, that one is going to fit under comfort. They're looking for something in that moment to make them feel better. It could also be that they're looking for something in that moment to escape. I can fairly confidently, in fact, no, I'm going to go for it, very confidently say that one or more of you in this room have got back from a difficult day at work or a difficult day in some other situation and gone, I need to eat the chocolate, I need to order a takeaway, I need to eat the ice cream. Because in that moment, what you're on the face of it doing is eating the food for the comfort. But actually, what are we really feeling at the end of that difficult day? You might be feeling really disappointed. You might be feeling really frustrated. You might be feeling embarrassed about something that's happened in a meeting. You know, again, probably not only me. You say something in a meeting and you beat yourself up about it for hours afterwards because, you know, you feel like you've said something really stupid. And those things are uncomfortable at best. Now, if food is the way that we make ourselves feel something else, that's what the I need this. You also hear it with alcohol an awful lot. And I think people understand it with alcohol a lot more. I've had a bad day at work, glass of wine gets poured, because the only thing in that moment that's going to help to change your emotional state is the glass of wine. That's kind of more understandable because it literally does change the way that your brain functions. However, the same can be said for food. And then we've got reward. I've got through the bad day, I deserve this. Now, these things on the surface of it, aren't that big a deal. We all do it. However, if they are causing you distress, if your answer to it is to always overeat, and then massively restrict, that's more of a problem. And that is exactly the work that I do. From the point of people who just would like to be able, I have a client who calls herself a cafe-aholic. It was her thing. She would always socialize with people in a cafe, and there was no way that she was ever going to do that without eating a piece of cake. Now, when it comes to her losing weight, she can make the choice to have the piece of cake. But if she's socializing 6 days a week, and the cake then becomes the full lunch, and the cake, and the stuff at home because she wants to reward herself for something, then we're stepping into territory where actually that piece of cake is about so much more. And if she wants to make a difference to her diet, then we're going to have to look at what the function of the cake was. And yes, it tasted nice, but that cake was about so much more than the way that it tasted. And she now does do things very differently. This is where not quite sure if I can read this backwards. Number 3, you've got self-trust erosion. I believe, and Claire will know this very well, that I think that trusting yourself with food is not talked enough about. You will have diets that tell you, just take everything out of your house that you find that you want to eat. I mean, not everything. That would be a really bad diet. Don't do that. But empty the biscuits, empty the fridge, don't have the ice cream in, don't buy the cake. Oh, you always overeat on chocolate cake. Don't buy it. Don't let yourself have it. And the message every time that happens is that you can't be trusted with food. That the cake is the thing that has the power. And so, to take back control, you're just going to eradicate it. I come from a very different point of view, that actually, in order to deal with the chocolate cake, as an example, you need to learn to trust yourself with that cake. I'm going to have to, hang on, I'm going to have to step off because I can't see the thing. If I can get this. Okay, so ignoring and not understanding hunger is a massive part of this. Have you ever really thought to yourself about what hunger feels like? And I don't mean the hunger that is, I am starving right now, I could eat anything in sight. I was in hospital with my son last week, and he was in for 2 nights, and he had to be nil by mouth because they didn't know if he'd need to have surgery. And me and him sat there, we hadn't eaten for hours. And we sat there and we had this conversation. He's 11. And he said, "Mum, I can't stop thinking about food." And I said, "No, me neither." And he was like, "Is that normal?" I said, "Yeah, it's totally normal because you're really bloody hungry." But it reminded me about how clever the human brain is in making sure that you get food. So if you massively restrict food, the brain goes, "Oh, we're in danger," and you will think about food again and again. You know, you take bread out of your diet. Again, don't ever do that, it's delicious. And you can't stop thinking about bread. And all of a sudden, every road you go down, there's a bakery, and they've got a special offer on your favourite bread, and all that kind of thing. You get the idea. There were quite a few nods in the room now about, yeah, we know what that's like. So not in those moments when you're really hungry, but just in those moments when you're trying to work out if it's time for lunch. Maybe you have the ability to decide when your lunchtime is. And then you really pay attention to it, and you notice that actually you're hungry at 11 o'clock in the morning. But the rule says we don't eat at 11 o'clock in the morning. The rule says we eat at midday or 12:30, so we sit it out. We haven't really paid attention to what our hunger is telling us. And not only that, we're going so far as to completely ignore it. Hunger is normal. You're meant to feel hungry. It's a survival mechanism. Then secondly, and I've already touched on this, but outsourcing things to external plans. You follow the diet. It tells you when to eat. It tells you what to eat. It tells you what to cut out. It tells you what you're allowed. And each time you do that, you lose trust in yourself to know what it is that your body needs. I don't need to know any of you in this room to know that you are all intelligent people. You're not stupid. You know full well that the body needs fruit and veg and protein and carbohydrates. You don't really need to know much more than that to know what it is that your body needs. And then we've got the biggie, guilt and shame cycles. So every time that you do something with food that makes you feel like you've done something wrong, you feel guilty for it. I've done a bad thing. I shouldn't have eaten the chocolate cake. I've done a bad thing. And then if it spills over into shame, well, shame is a whole different ballgame, because shame tells us that not only have we done a bad thing, which is what guilt tells us, shame tells us that we are bad. We are bad people for eating the chocolate cake that we said that we wouldn't eat. And that is a dangerous cycle to get into when it comes to psychology. Because if you believe that you're a bad person, you'll do anything to make yourself feel like a good person. And if the bad person is the one who eats the chocolate cake, then the good person must be the person who doesn't eat the chocolate cake. So you wake up the next morning, I always give chocolate cake as an example. And you wake up the next morning and chocolate cake is off the menu again, because we are going to be strong and we're going to resist it. And we're going to eat our lunch at 12 o'clock because that's when we have to eat it, because those are the rules. And then we're going to think about the thing that we've said that we're not going to have. And you can see how it sets you up. And all the while, you don't trust yourself to know these things, to make those choices, to have that relationship with food that just feels relaxed. So, second question. If any of this is really resonating with you, then your question is, what function is control over food playing for you? So every time that you try to control food in any way, whether it's the time that you eat your lunch or what you eat or what you don't eat or any of those things, why is that? What is it doing for you? How is it leaving you feeling? If the way that you currently deal with food is to ask yourself, how do I control it? What happens if you ask yourself, hang on, I've been told to stay in the light, which is where I've always wanted to be fair. When I think about I can't read that word backwards. When I think about my healthiest self, what kind of person are they? This has nothing to do with your weight, your body size, or anything. The meaning of health is different to all of us. The World Health Organization says that the meaning of health is different to all of us because it spans so many things. Some may believe that the meaning of health is the absence of disease. But is that enough? It isn't for me, in my life, enough. So what is the healthiest version of yourself that you would imagine you could be in the future? How does that person eat? What does it look like for that person, for the person that you've created? And how do they speak to themselves about food? So what do they do? Well, what do they look like in terms of how they run their lives? How does that healthiest version of you eat? And what is the narrative in their head about food? Again, I'll give you a brief moment to kind of create that avatar, just to be modern. So then, the next thing that brings us to is the question of values within your relationship with food. And this is one of the things that I teach, that I think, I don't even really teach it. I kind of teach it, but really, I just allow people the space to think for themselves about what those values are. Because I don't know what your values are. Yours will be different to mine, to the person sat next to you. But knowing your own values is really important, because in the moment when you're making a choice about food, it makes things a whole lot easier. So what kind of person do you want to be? In fact, before what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person are you? Are you a person who really values the moment that you sit down with your family and you connect over food? I've just realised I can bring all this up on my phone, can't I? And then I don't have to keep doing that. Let me do that, and then, because the next bit, you're not going to want me to try and read without. Right. Now I can see what I'm doing. So as an example, I want to be, and this is personal to me, I want to be someone who feels both calm and confident and full of energy. Those three values are really important to me as a person. But how does that help when it comes to food? If you want to take just, again, a moment to think about your own values before I explain that a little bit more. Values are wide-ranging. There is connection, there is calmness, there is energy, there is a whole load of values. In fact, I once Googled values online, and the list is long, but there will be ones that stand out to you. So in the value of calm, when it comes to applying it to food, it might show up as feeling grounded and not chaotic. The way that you would see that on the outside is things like planning food and eating without multitasking. So there's no quick grabbing a takeaway and sitting and eating it in a kind of chaotic environment and standing in the kitchen and eating it. The value of calm tells me that actually there is value in doing that differently. Confident might mean that you are able to trust your choices, back to the trust. That could show up as simply as stopping eating when you're full, or not finishing everything on your plate because you've been taught that waste is a bad thing. I hear this a lot from women about waste, and we talk, it always comes up, and I always remind everyone that you are not a bin. The food is no better off in you than it is in the bin. If you are full, if you are done, if you are finished, then it is okay to put that food away. Now, if that is happening every single day and you're always throwing food away, then we have the question of, well, what do you need to do differently? And that probably means not buy as much or cook as much or plate up as much. Energy might mean to you having focus. And that may show up by balancing protein and carbs and eating regularly. And a lot of this is about trust. It's trusting yourself to know what matters to you. And the difference in the moment when you make a decision about food that is value-based as opposed to rule-based, willpower-based, is something that has the potential to completely change your relationship with food. My way of eating last week in hospital with my son was not in line with any of those values. I didn't have access to food in the same way that I would do. I was incredibly tired. It was all quite stressful, and I basically existed on carbs and sugar. Now today, I'd had my breakfast, and my first thought was, oh, there's a Kit Kat on the side. I could really eat that. Because the Kit Kat tastes nice. I'm allowed to eat the Kit Kat because I don't follow rules. But actually, it doesn't match with my values. My values in that moment, if I want to be full of energy, tell me that I haven't eaten a piece of fruit yet today. So maybe that's the thing that I need to do. And it doesn't help me to feel more confident about my choices because the Kit Kat is an urge. It's not a thing that I have to have in that moment. And I didn't eat the Kit Kat. Did I spend the rest of the day thinking, I really wish I'd eaten that Kit Kat? Oh, I really want one. No, not at all. Had I told myself that I must not eat the Kit Kat because I'm not allowed it, and we're using our willpower to get back on track, so don't you go near that Kit Kat, chances are I'd be feeling very different about the Kit Kat. Probably quite annoyed that I couldn't just have it, or wishing that I had, or actually setting myself up for this evening being not just one Kit Kat, but 5, because I denied myself in that moment. Whereas knowing, just in a very calm way, that I didn't need that Kit Kat because it doesn't match. It's just a choice I made. It's just a choice in that moment. I want to give you one thing that can help in the moment. And it's going to sound really simple. But don't all the best things that actually make a difference sound simple? Pausing. That's it. So if you want to build your trust in yourself to make decisions about food, then I want you to pause before you make your next decision about food. And ask yourself, what am I feeling in this moment? Because if we go back to my Kit Kat, what I was actually feeling was really rather nervous because I was coming here this afternoon and still quite overwhelmed with some health stuff that's going on with my kids and still looking for something to make that kind of slight sense of discomfort that I was carrying with me go away. And the Kit Kat might have done that temporarily. So the question of what am I feeling in this moment can guide you an awful lot to know whether it's just a thing that you're choosing to eat because it's going to taste really nice, or whether it's something else. Secondly, if your answer to that is, as I was with the chocolate this morning, well, I don't really think I want that. I think there's something else going on. Then what do I really need in this moment? What I really needed in that moment this morning was actually just to get on with some other stuff. I needed a distraction from it. But there will be moments when asking yourself, what do I really need in this moment, might be that you need to speak to someone that you trust, that you need a connection with another human. It might be that you need to do something that is fun and energetic. It might be that you need to go out for a walk and change your environment. There are so many things that in that moment you might need care. You might need to give yourself some attention. You might need to have a connection with another human. And then it shifts it away from being about the food and shifts it towards being about the thing that it's really about. And then thirdly, because I've said it already, and the people who work with me get really fed up with me saying it, but you are allowed to eat the thing. There is nothing that says that you can't eat it. They are just rules that you have learned, that you have given yourself over time. It's just that in that moment, you might want to make a different choice. But if you do decide to eat it, can you do it intentionally? So the Kit Kat this morning would have been eaten in my kitchen, stood up quite quickly. It's a very different thing to purposefully going and sitting somewhere and only being in the moment with the Kit Kat. They are two different experiences of the food. The first one, it doesn't really hit the sides. The second one is a much more possible way of being mindful about the experience of the eating. So if you are going to eat the thing, can you do it intentionally? Sometimes that means I have some clients who we start off with, if they're going to eat biscuits, instead of eating a whole pack of biscuits, they will intentionally plate 3, and they'll take the plate of 3 somewhere and pay attention to what it is. So there are different ways of doing it, and sometimes we need to be quite active in these things to learn for it to be different. The last question that I want you to ask yourself is, what is your biggest takeaway from this? When I was doing my personal trainer training, they used to ask it at the end of every session. And I did in-person training down in Milton Keynes, and there was the moment where you just feel a bit squirmy. So I'm really sorry that I am now asking you the same question that made me squirm in my boots. The difference was I'm not going to get you to walk around and find someone that you don't know and tell them it, which is what we had to do. But yeah, that face was exactly the face I used to pull. They're like, oh, don't make me. But think about it. What is your biggest takeaway? Because I've covered lots about, well, a very large topic in a very short amount of time. Because the first thing that comes into your head is likely the thing that will guide you as to what is going to be the most useful thing to think more broadly about. Lastly, if I can leave you with any kind of statement, it would be that you don't need more control. You need a different relationship with food and with yourself, although actually often with yourself first. If there is anything that anyone would like to ask about or just observe, and I know this stuff actually in front of other people can be quite difficult to kind of blurt out your experience of, but questions, comments, observations, I am here for it. I'm not sure I would go as far as to say banned. I wish that humans didn't have such a desire to oversimplify the complicated. And that we weren't all, me included, sold on what looks like the next shiny object that's going to solve the problem, when really we know that it's more complex than that. And I have been to a slimming club. I lost a lot of weight at a slimming club. And that was pre my daughter. And I went back breastfeeding her. So she was about 4 weeks old at the time. And she had tongue tie, and it was all a terribly painful thing. And I sat there in this slimming meeting wanting to scream in pain. And it just hit me that it was ridiculous. That actually I was there because I thought that the way to feel better was to jump straight back into the control and making myself smaller. And I think really that was the start of this journey in many ways. So I think there is capacity for slimming clubs to not be quite so blasé about, if you don't stick to the rules, then you're failing. And also, oh, you've had a bad week, you've gained weight, so let's just move on and stick to the plan and just stick to the plan and do it right this week. Because whatever's gone wrong in that week is incredibly valuable. It's to learn from, because there's a reason why it hasn't gone so well. And I'm always interested, to a very annoying level, in what happened. And I have a whole thing that I use with people that makes them look at every single part of it, because we learn a huge amount from when things go well, but we learn a whole heap from when things don't go so well. That was a very long answer to that question. So not banned, but maybe just a little bit more comprehensive.
I know when we did some work together, when I first started, I'd worked a lot on myself with the body positivity movement, because that's obviously a big thing now. And so when I then started working with Katy, I found a conflict of interest in a way, because equally on social media there's a lot of that now, a lot of like, just love yourself as you are and all that sort of stuff. But actually what you helped me do was kind of help the two coexist. And it was like having the two in the same space, that actually it's okay to value yourself and love yourself as you are, but it's also okay to want to lose weight and actually do that. And I think what you've said tonight kind of reflects that, with it being more about what you're putting into yourself in a goal way, in a healthy way, actually I'm just doing it because I want to nurture and look after myself. In my late 40s now, I'm wanting to be stronger for my kids, my potential grandkids, and do that. And I remember when I lost a bit of weight, I almost felt a bit coy about it, because I was almost like, well, I don't want to make a thing about it, but I'm also really proud of myself. And I think what you helped teach us in one of our sessions was, that's okay, you can be proud of yourself for that, and it's okay to do that. And I think one of your reels you shared, which was really good, about your new pair of jeans, and it's that kind of slight conflict of, I feel really good about this actually, but does that conflict really with that feeling of, I should kind of like myself, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really, when I went kind of quite anti-diet, I really tried to be, the whole body positive. But I just kept coming back to, I don't feel quite comfortable. And I am not, these are the new jeans that I put on social media. They are, in fact, the ones. But I am not the thinnest I've ever been right now. And I get grief from people, not ever to my face yet, but about what do I know? What do I know about helping women with food and being a personal trainer and all the stuff that I do, when I'm not the image that people are really, really fed about how you should look if you work in the fitness industry. And the reason that I am this size rather than my thinnest is because I have a life that I want to live. I have a busy job that takes up a heap of my time. And I have 3 children. I have 2 11-year-olds and I have an 8-year-old. And I have a husband and I have an aging mum. And all this stuff. And you know what pushing yourself down to your thinnest takes? It takes time and it takes energy. And I don't want to put my energy into that. If the people who are rude about me want to, they're living their lives, and that's fine. I am I am who I am. And I think this is where I would have never been at this point in being able to so comfortably say that had I not learned all the stuff about just being a lot more relaxed and values-led in myself. Because, yeah, you're absolutely allowed to want to lose weight and make that choice. But I have always said, and will continue to say, that you don't have to lose weight through misery. You don't have to be miserable doing it. In fact, actually, you can be quite happy.
I think as I've reflected on some of the things you've said tonight, what's come up for me is how my relationship with food actually collects more to my relationship with money and my relationship with being a good person, not necessarily as it's connected to how I look and the way my body looks. But for example, I realise my less optimal food choices often come out of convenience because I've not planned, because I'm tired and overwhelmed by the responsibilities of life. So the thought of cooking is like, you know, so you make the easy choices because of the overwhelm of all the other things, and then you can tip yourself into, I realise I can then tip myself into the shame thoughts, because like, oh, a healthy person would have meal prepped, and I wouldn't have, I would have had that prepared, and I would have eaten better if I hadn't got that takeaway, because of, if I'd been more on it, I would have made better choices. But some of those things are my food entanglements come around when I've made choices that are convenient but don't necessarily align with what I would like my healthiest version to be. And then, of course, you then get into, well, I've wasted money because I've got all this food in the fridge, but I've just spent 30 quid on a takeaway that I didn't really need. It's not always for me about how it's going to affect my body and the way I look, but it does still affect my mental health and the way I view myself, because it's about who I should be, how I should have behaved, how I should have handled it better, but it's still in response to the emotions of life and the feelings of life and the things that I carry to make myself feel better. I use food because I don't feel like I can handle the responsibilities that I'm holding. So making food choices easier is a way for me to feel less overwhelmed, but it doesn't always align with the values that I would like to have as a healthy person and the way I would like to bring my kids up and what they see. So I just wanted to kind of share how it's kind of hitting for me and where I will reflect going forward.
Yeah, that's a really useful thing to think about clearly for you. And I have fairly strong opinions about the word should. I always remember when I worked at the retreat in therapy with people, as soon as anyone in group therapy said should or should not, every therapist in the room went. Because should and should not are judgment words. They carry with them a load that often puts way more on us than we deserve, actually, than we need and than we deserve. And so any time that there's a should, it's a signal to go, what is that about? Like, where has the should come from? What actually is pushing that? Is it that it was stuff as I was growing up that's kind of taught me that this is the way that I should be? Or are these ways that I've taught myself I need to behave in order to take up space in the world or to deserve love? So there's often big questions that go with that type of thing. And I think the fact that you're just noticing it, you know, and being able, you've put so many connections there, you'll go away from here and you'll be like, oh, okay, actually, maybe some of the overwhelm is the should. Maybe not, but it's worth thinking about. And how you could trust yourself to use convenience in a way that is genuinely convenient, not wrapped up in all the emotional burden as well. I hope that all made sense.
So kind of what I was going to ask is, like, obviously I resonate with a lot, in fact most things that have been said in different areas for different reasons. Where do you start? Where do you start to look at it?
Say that last bit again.
So, like, where do you start to look at it? So obviously I resonate in probably generally every area that we've kind of spoke about it. Where do you start with it?
So the place that I start, so I have a 6-week online program, and each week is a different thing that people focus on. And where we start is back to basics. So there is no plan to follow. There is no, and the number of times I have people say, "You're not giving me where's my plan?" Because it feels uncomfortable because you think that's what you need. But actually, number one that we look at is, do you genuinely understand what hunger and fullness feel to you? And that's a whole week's work, just that topic, because we easily lose sight of those things. And I have a little scale, and it's got silly emojis on it for, you know, whether you're down at you're about to eat the leather of your shoes type hungry, or you're so full that you just physically can't imagine ever eating again. And looking at what is your experience on that scale. So those 6 weeks with me starts off with stuff that people go, really? And each week, it's layering that. Because really what we want, if we're aiming for trusting yourself, we need to find the basics of what the foundations are for that. So after here, if you're looking for one thing to do, I would definitely try the pause thing and just notice actually what is going on in this moment. I know me and you were talking before, and you have free access at work to some very nice food, which adds a whole other layer on it, because it's much harder to resist food when it's, you know, literally there. Can I safely say that if that Kit Kat this morning had been a slice of my favourite carrot cake? Don't know, jury's out. But taking that moment to go, what is this? What is this about? Am I really hungry, or am I trying to fill something else here? And see what you come up with.
So, you know, when you were talking about kind of links the hunger thing and about how, you know, if you're hungry at 11 a.m., it's kind of, that's lunchtime, that's fine. I feel like for me, if I listened to that, I would be a bit like a hobbit and end up with second breakfast and 11s and, you know, afternoon tea, which probably wouldn't be the best in terms of, you know, staying within kind of a healthy calorie amount for that day. I feel like I'm pretty on it with my breakfast, lunch and tea. You know, I have my snacks, so I'm not like under eating or anything, but I always feel like food is always on my mind, and after about an hour I'm always hungry again. At what point does that change? Is there anything that's kind of major with that, or is that just the human experience of just being a person that is a bit of a foodie?
Well, do you know, I was talking to a client this morning about this, because she does food work with me, but she has a PT that does her fitness stuff. And he has a very different view on this than I do, which is difficult for her because she's kind of stuck in the middle. But one of the things that we were talking about was that actually for someone like him, it's a much easier thing to just decide on, this is the amount that I'm going to eat during the day. For her and for me, that wouldn't work for me, because actually I think I am quite a hungry person, and all of our hunger levels are different. You can take the same height, the same body weight, the same muscle mass, and you will experience hunger differently to that person. So if there are times when actually, and remember also, hunger is normal. Like we're meant to have periods of hunger. But if there's a moment in your day when you're actually really distractedly hungry, then maybe that is a time to pop a little snack in. Claire and I talked a lot about this. Or maybe your breakfast is something that needs some more protein in it, or needs to be a bit bigger, but don't fear experimenting with it, I think is the thing that I'd say to people. If that feeling really hungry at that time of day isn't, if it's just one of those things that you're not actually that bothered about, then is it worth bothering about? But actually, if it is something that bothers you, experiment with it. And trust that you're not going to be someone who goes, right, I'm going to have my breakfast, and then I'm going to have my brunch, and then I'm going to have my lunch, and then I'm going to have my dinner. Because often those things that we mistrust in ourselves aren't worth mistrusting.
I do have a question, but just what you were saying. So I do boot camp with Kate 3 times a week. I found out I was naturally a hobbit. And when I realised it's because I genuinely was hungry, it stopped me binge eating in the night time. And that was where my problem was going, binge eating on the night. I was like, I'll eat everything. But actually, when I started eating properly during the day, and I do actually get hungry like 6 times a day, I am a hobbit. And accepting that, it took away my food problem. And it's probably the healthiest I've been after having my 2 kids. Not when I was in my 20s, obviously. But the question I've got is, my daughter recently has become body aware of what other people look like and how she looks. She's not connected food to weight yet, but she started having weight questions. What sort of topics or themes of things should I be, or could I be saying to help her with that food relationship before she's connected the dots at this point?
It's such a big area of concern for parents, isn't it? And, you know, I never have a problem with saying I don't have the full answer to something. Well, I don't have a problem saying I don't have the answer at all, if I don't have the answer at all. My take on it is that children learn from what they watch. And I know that your daughter is similar age to my daughter, Paige. And they watch, they see what you eat, they listen to how you talk about food. And if the general sense of anything around food in the family can be about, this is food that gives us energy, this is food that helps to make us strong, this is food that, you know, as silly as it is with the whole, like, you know, carrots to see in the dark, but, you know, these are the things that help us just with our general health in our body. The more protected they are from stepping into anything to do with their bodies being anything other than the amazing things that they can do, and that we can choose to nourish those rather than anything else. And we talk a lot in my house about being strong and capable, and, you know, that sugar is fine, but also too much of anything wouldn't be a great thing. But I don't know if I'm getting it right. I suppose only time will tell. I know I'm doing it very differently to when I grew up, and hopefully that's helpful. But I tell my children that fruit and veg is a really good thing. And Paige cried the other day because Finlay, her brother, said to her, you know, you need 5 fruit and veg a day. And she burst into tears and said, no, I don't. All very dramatically. And then she comes home from school today telling us about how she wants a piece of fruit when she gets in, because school have told her that it's really healthy. So I don't know why I bother, to be honest. And she completely denies the conversation with Finlay. No, I didn't. I'm going to exist now on fruit. She ate some raspberries, one satsuma, packet of crisps, and what did she find? I think there was a biscuit in there. So, balance.
What would you say about hormones and how they affect ladies of a certain age?
Ladies of a certain age.
Yeah, just in general.
It's, again, I am no expert in the kind of the perimenopause and menopause world, other than what I learned the other way. I've never done any specific qualification. I am, if you go back to when I qualified as a nurse, that lady of a certain age. So I do have some personal experience. And obviously, all of my clients are women. So we talk about this a lot. And hormones govern everything that happens in our body. And to imagine that wouldn't impact, it's sort of surprising that we've ended up taking this long for it to be so recognised. I think it's really important to take it as seriously for yourself as you need to. So going to the GP for discussion about hormone replacement, if that's the right thing. To go slightly the other way, I think the negative effects of hormones are often only over-egged by the companies who are really trying to make money off you. Do not get me started on collagen, because I will rant for the next 10 minutes. Collagen is a protein. Your body doesn't know that it's taking on board collagen, so it doesn't send it to your collagen areas. All it needs is protein to do that. Now, I'm allowed to say that because I'm not trying to charge you £200 a month for a collagen supplement. But I think we have to be cautious that we are big business for anything to do with the things that cause us the most distress. And I know I'm saying that as someone who sells things that help, but I am not trying to sell you a powder that's somehow magically going to cure you in your coffee. So I would say use medical advice when needed, choose where you get your information from, and very sadly be skeptical. There are real things about hormones. As our estrogen levels drop, we do tend to store fat in our lower abdomen much more. But the way to lose weight is still through a calorie deficit, not powdered coffee or powdering coffee. And there are people making millions off this. And it really annoys me.
I just think as well that because it can affect you emotionally, like it can, where you weren't previously, I don't know, if you weren't anxious before and you are finding yourself being more anxious now, that can then drive something different. So something else can come up, whereas it's never been a problem before.
Yeah.
So you might reflect and go, oh, actually, I don't really struggle with that. But actually now, oh, maybe I am. Maybe that's a new thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the things that often happens in midlife, I hate the term midlife, but I don't know what else we need another definition, is that we live very different lives to in our 20s and early 30s. You know, generally the pressure that you exist under is higher. I'm very much at that point of being the generation that is completely stuck between children and aging parents. And my parents need quite a lot right now. And that's very different to when I was, child-free and my parents ran their own lives without doing ridiculous things that need reigning. It's like having toddlers. But I think there is potential for not only the hormones to drive emotion, but also for us to have lost ways that we've maybe managed it without noticing that we're managing it. If you are in your early 30s, you've got a job, you don't have kids, you may be in a relationship, but it's, it doesn't really feel like it's overwhelming in any way, and that's it, then it's much more possible to not rely on convenience foods and get outside and exercise and find joy. Joy. Go out with your friends and have a wild night out and not need to plan everything around it. And then for many women, as we get to that midpoint, that shifts. So it is the whole thing, I think.
Many thanks for a very interesting talk. Can we just go back to the Kit Kat example?
Yes.
Do you have any hints or tips for the situation where the attraction to the Kit Kat is really overpowering? So how do you pause?
Very good question, which actually, it's almost like I set this up and I didn't. But at the end, I do have a QR code that you can scan and it'll take you to a free download of a free thing that's going to help you with that kind of thing. But yeah, that was seamlessly done. I think it's such a valid question because obviously what I'm talking about when I say about pausing is to be able to pause. And it's very easy to find yourself in a situation where you're past that point. You know, where the urge to eat it is, it's beginning to spiral.
Yeah, because where I'm coming from is I get the logic.
Yeah.
My logical brain picks up what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's more when I'm in autopilot mode.
Yes, yeah. And there are things like making sure that you're doing all the stuff that is about not in that moment. So, you know, that you're not getting to the end of the day, for example, and although I know mine was a morning example, but you're not getting to the end of the day and you haven't eaten enough. You know, you're genuinely hungry. Because if we go back to my example about me and Finlay fantasizing about all the many foods that we were going to eat when we weren't so hungry, if you're hungry, it makes it much harder. And generally trying to be someone who is kind of aware of what triggers might be. That's all the stuff that exists before the moment. And I think definitely if you're in that moment where it's completely overwhelming and the urge is really high, then it takes practice to go, right, I'm going to go and do another thing. And there are skills, genuine skills, and I teach a whole load of skills, but things like you make an if-when plan. So if my urge to eat a packet of Kit Kats is really high, I will do X. And you keep it on your phone, you keep it in your notes section. You know that you've written it in a moment when you're not feeling out of control, and you try the stuff that you've written down. It might be, I know, it always sounds a bit silly, but genuinely, there is a real skill in just jumping up and down. Because if you jump up and down, your emotional state changes. Or dance, put music on that makes you feel a different way. So there are many things, but it's practicing when you're not at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great, thank you.
So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is where I try to cross-post to Facebook. My main posting place is Instagram, just because it has more user-friendly features. So you can find me at Katy Miles Personal Training. And also on the screen, there is a QR code because I'm that fancy these days that I created one just for you. And it is going to take you to my brand new guide, which says quite a lot about my personality, that I've called it Crack the Evening Snack Attack, because it felt, I don't know, is that alliteration? In there, it will give you some of what we've talked about tonight, but it will give you a few more questions to help yourself to understand it and a few more things to practice. So it is an email sign up, And as soon as you have entered your details, it should bounce straight into your inbox, hopefully. Thank you very much.